to the Wheeler Centre. I'm Alison Croggon, and we're here tonight to speak to three redoubtable women of the theatre. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nations, the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today we're speaking to three of our most distinguished theatre artists. They're long-term theatrical collaborators whose work has more often found a home in innovative, independent stages than in establishment state theatres. Patricia Cornelius is a founding member of Melbourne Workers Theatre. That's Patricia. Hi, Patricia. She's a playwright, novelist, and film writer. And earlier this year, she won one of the most mysterious prizes in literature, the Windham-Campbell Prize, which is worth so much money. Amazing.
Unbelievable.
And
we're good friends.
So you can touch her up for a loan later. Susie Dee has worked extensively in the theatre as a performer, a deviser and director in Australia and overseas, and she's been the artistic director of 3 theatre companies, Melbourne Workers Theatre, Union House Theatre, and the Institute of Complex Entertainment.
ICE for short.
ICE for short. And Nicci Wilks at the end is a freelance artist continually creating and performing works of various art forms around the world. Very hard bio to summarise. She began her career with the Flying Fruit Fly Circus and has worked in theatre and circus as all sorts of different kinds of performance. So I guess we'll talk about that. Most recently, they've collaborated on a production of Shit at 45 Downstairs, which is part of a double bill with Patricia's earlier play, Love, that next month travels to the Venice Biennale, and it's the first production ever to do so. So, yay! First Australian production. Did I say that?
In the theatre festival.
In the theatre festival. So that's amazing. So to give us a taste of their work, we're going to open with the opening monologue of Shit, performed by Nicci Wilks.
And he goes, look at you. Fuck, look at you. What the fuck you done? You fucking done nothing. You never fucking gonna do something, you fucked up waste of space. What fucking contribution you made? Nothing. Nothing at all, you fucked up nothing. Fucking nothing you are. A big fucking nothing. He goes, the biggest fucking nothing. The biggest fucking nothing I know. And I think, who's this fucking fucked up fuck telling me I'm fucked up? Who's he? And I'll go, who are you to fucking tell me I'm fucking nothing, you fucking fuck? You're the fucked up nothing, never gonna fucking do nothing, fuck. What contribution you? And you're fucking telling me I'm fucking nothing makes you fucking way more fucking nothing. What?
It's a bit amazing that we had a discussion about whether she should have a microphone.
We
thought
not.
maybe not.
Maybe not. So to begin, I mean, thank you, Nicci, that was great. I so loved that monologue. In fact, that whole opening scene, which continues with a discussion of whether she swears too much. And that's a voice we don't often see on our main stages, even though it's going to the Venice Biennale to represent Australia. And why do you think that is? I mean, why is this voice that we recognise so clearly and is so clear, so rare?
I think it's about the pretense that we still hold that we are not a country that has any class distinction, that we're a country that is still kind of attached to a kind of high art, that our theatre is about a language that is heightened but very verified, and so that we don't want to represent the underclass or the working class even, in the sense that we don't even actually want to acknowledge they exist.
Yeah, but your writing is actually really heightened.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think you're really right, but that doesn't seem to be a problem with other theatres. So I've obviously thought about this quite a bit, like why is the kind of thing we think about as theatre on our main stages is a middle class, aspirational circumstances, people, characters, and the idea that there should be anybody who's outside those classes, it seldom happens. But that does happen overseas.
Yeah.
I mean, so how much is this to do with being a colonial culture as well as a culture that doesn't actually admit that class exists in this country? Or are these two things connected? What do you think, Susie?
Yeah, I don't know. I started thinking about theatre in Australia and the early Australian theatre companies. You know, white Australia is still young, and I think the plays that the first contribution of plays in Australia, if you look at MTC or the early STC or the Nimrod plays. It was interesting, when you look back at the 70s or 80s, we actually had a really great culture at the Pram Factory and the Mama, who were really trying to find Australian voices. We had the Hibbards and the Max Gillies and the Romrels, mainly male playwrights, writing for sort of, looking at class.
And even
but
David
Williamson, earlier looked at sort of not just middle class, but looked at the classes. It's a mystery, isn't it? But really the last sort of 20, 30 years we've gone into this sort of middle class domain and we've sat in there.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we're talking mainstream theatre.
We're talking mainstream. Sure, independent theatre. Yeah, of course, there's a great variety.
Yeah.
Well, not a great variety.
But there is a variety.
Yeah, sure. But I don't know. I don't know, because you think Australian theatre has, the mainstream have sort of, it's been emulating English theatre or an American theatre. Like I lived in Spain many years ago, and it was amazing the theatre that I was seeing, like in Spain, even in the National Theatre. It wasn't about, there was shows about class, but there was also very experimental work.
Yeah.
Now with horses on stage, nudity, you'd never really go and see that at our main stages in Melbourne. So why are we so conservative?
Yeah. Have you any thoughts on that, Nicci?
I think, I don't know. I don't have that big history in theatre in Australia, but I wonder that we've become more tame and more ticking the boxes because of funding, because it is harder to make art in Australia now, or theatre, and therefore, and I can't imagine Melbourne Workers Theatre existing today because it never wanted to fit in the box. It wanted to fit outside of the box, and so it couldn't tick the boxes. So I think it's much harder. And from having written many grant applications with Susie over the years, I've experienced that, of trying to make work that isn't main stage or is about class or whatever. But it's harder to get backing for it.
It's not
support.
Palatable. It's not
it's
palatable.
not palatable.
In the mainstream, it's not.
Yeah.
The general public still want to have, nice, mild entertainment, I think.
Or do they, though?
No, I don't think they
Well,
do.
Patricia doesn't think so.
I think they don't know.
Well, why do those companies just program that crap?
Well,
Because nobody will take risks. I think it's about risk
being televised.
even though it's not a risk.
Oh, sorry. Oh, never get a job, never have been offered.
I mean, it's like trying to get shit programmed around Australia or in festivals. It's hard because of the word shit. It
upsets people.
Pardon? It does. It upsets people. Yeah.
Well, you should tell the story from the Neon, the SH.
We premiered shit at MTC. They were running an independent festival called Neon, which was basically It was the home to. They were housing independent theatre shows under a festival. We were all paid very minimally, but at least we got to showcase the work. And so we did shit there. Patricia and I got together. They actually asked us, would we like to present something? So Patricia said, let's do shit. And I went, really? And it was great. They accepted the title. So we did this work, and it was a great success. People, loved the buoyancy of the work and the vibrancy of the language and the whole show. But the MTC audiences were ringing up, and they were, asking to book for the show that says has SHIT. They couldn't say the actual word.
Really?
So quite a lot of people, SHIT. So we had great pleasure in the foyer when the bells would ring in the MTC foyer and that beautiful, mellifluous voice would come over. Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to go and see shit. Please make your way to see shit. But it was amazing to hear these stories about a lot of people. And, they couldn't say the word. And you think, well, maybe they shouldn't be coming.
But maybe they should be coming. Yeah, that's the other argument.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Do you know if those people... is there any way of knowing if those people who went to see shit, which is a very enjoyable play, I should say.
Yeah, it's
it's tough, but it's really smart and funny and, robust and so much full of energy.
I remember the last couple of days when we were at Melbourne Theatre Company, I did... look for a couple of people that weren't my peers that I thought, I'd love to hear their feedback.
Yeah.
And, very, conservative sort of looking people that would probably come to see, much more mainstream stuff. And it was two women especially that I spoke to, and they absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
they loved it. They said they were totally surprised, and they loved the freshness and the language, and of course they go, oh yes, we see those women on on the trams. Never seen them on the stages, but wow. So I think.
Just going back to the sort of programming, why the companies, those mainstream companies that do have partial government, our funding, taxpayers' funding, why they don't take risks with work like shit or tough for Australian works. They actually don't take a lot of risk with Australian works, new works at all. And that's why you see kind of plethora of adaptations. It's like it's safer territory that we might be able to adapt things that are well received, and rather than kind of take a risk on the
that's
on
what
new
happened
voice.
with you, wasn't it? It was
With
like
Elba.
Yeah.
I love doing the adaptation. That's wonderful, and was really
MTC's production of Lorca's play
House of
Bernardo Alba, which Patricia did
it's
last
really
year. Yeah.
fabulous to do, and great for one's craft, really. But you kind of go, why aren't you doing new work? Why you get so nervous about? And it's always, sometimes I think they can't even know whether it's any good. They kind of feel there's an anxiety about it. Or how will the subscribers manage with this? And you think, actually, give them a chance. I think that they underestimate their subscribers. I think that that most people don't want to leave the theatre. One, having dozed through most of it.
Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. But I actually think that if they stay awake and they kind of... Your theatre is so fabulous when you're contested. So that's what the dramatic nature is about with theatre, is that you kind of go, oh my God, you're making me believe something for a moment that I never thought I would consider in a million years. And even if it is reactionary, even if, that you can be absolutely contested in a way that is quite disturbing on oneself. And I think that's what theatre is, what's marvellous about it. So you kind of go, I actually think that people would respond quite well, and that the risks need to be taken.
I've been very concerned over the last, wherever, but the increasing kind of corporatisation of our whole culture. Yeah. It's always been a thing, but more and more and more so, particularly over the last decade. Lots of people have talked about this, but seeing how that then plays out into what's permissible. And so we're kind of talking about, what's permissible and what's not permissible, and I go and see these shows because I do, because it's one of my jobs, and a lot of the time I am so bored. Or I'm sitting there going, why is this being done? Because you can see all the reasons, they're kind of on top. But what isn't there is like the passionate reason to actually do theatre, you know, which is whatever it is. What you were saying about the being contested, but it's at many levels, isn't it? It's like.
But I also think that I think I will contest that as well, because
Yeah.
I do think, I mean, I spoke to those two women, but I know I had someone come along to Shit who was a family member who is a MTC subscriber. I'm not talking about the MTC, but she actually said, I didn't like it. I didn't like this work because I want to be entertained. I didn't find this very entertaining. You know, I want to.
But there's lots of ways of being entertained. I mean,
Yeah,
for
but
some
she
of
didn't
us,
want
some
to be
of us.
contested. She didn't want to be contested.
Yeah.
She didn't
No,
actually.
I don't come to work called shit.
Yes, she came for she came because it was connected to me.
okay.
That's all. She wasn't coming because. But I'm saying, there's a large demographic that I think.
I agree, but at the same time, I think we can be entertained better.
Absolutely, of
I
course.
think also
of course.
I like to use the word engagement. You know, that not everything is about entertainment. You sort of can go to lots of entertainment and you go, oh, you know, that was fun, or that was great. Had a little sing-along. I don't know what you do with entertainment, but you kind of are not into it, obviously. But I think that engagement is everything, and it has the same feeling. You kind of you get elated by being engaged by something, and that's hard enough to do without throwing in a song or whatever.
You can be engaged by songs.
Yeah, you can.
It's interesting when people, you know,
Or
maybe a lot of
entertainment.
people here, when you go to see a people theatre, it's very interesting when a lot of people say, oh, I really connected to those characters. Oh, I saw myself in that play, or it was a great reflection, it was a mirror. And I go,
Of what?
Of what? And why do you want to do that? Just look in
Yeah.
the mirror. You know, you want to go to theatre to see something different, to sort of
Yeah.
have your mind explode and opened a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Otherwise, watch TV and see reflections of yourself.
Though, you know, to be fair, a lot of television is pretty good these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to talking about collaboration. Like, you've all collaborated together for a long time, haven't you? Like,
Yeah.
Nicci, how long have you been working with these reprobates? Like,
I've known Susie for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I've known Susie since I was very young, from Circus Oz.
yeah.
But we reconnected at a workshop in 2009 with La Fira del Bao from
Okay.
Spain, and after doing that workshop, maybe I stuck myself under her nose a bit. I'm not sure, but we were interested in making that big site-specific work, and since then we've created. I don't know how many. What do we think?
Maybe about 8 or...
8 or 9 or 10, not sure, shows together. And I also have, Susie's been like a bit of a mentor for me, not a bit, a lot. And I've been an assistant director on Taxi.
Oh, okay.
That's where we really kind of started working together, I think, which Patricia wrote. And then, it's kind of, we've been doing a lot since then.
It's interesting because I had such a close relationship with Nicci, but I remember seeing her as quite a young person in Circus Oz, and Circus Oz has its own particular style of performance making, but I just knew, I just knew I'm going to work with her one day. I just in the theatre, and that not just because that there is something about, because actually just picking up the other thing about class and stuff is that there's a kind of what happens in drama schools now is that you can't afford to go unless you're really looked after a bit or supported by family or whatever. But it's really, and actually becoming a big problem in London, and where they can't find a lot of actors who can play class. And you think that a good actor can play across class, but actually it's quite oddly difficult. But especially if you really have just got the same sound and you're aiming to create the same kind of work, then you're not looking. See, she had the right voice for.
It is the only show. Shit's the only show I've ever done where I've been told do whatever you want with your voice. Usually, I get told to, be quieter or go deeper or not so shrill. But yeah, I was allowed to go for it in shit, which I loved.
So, and you two have been working together for 30 years. I mean, I saw...
Yes, we have.
Is it 30 years?
Probably more.
Yeah, probably a bit more, really.
Yeah,
we both...
We'll pass over. But the first thing I saw you in was Lily and May, which...
Oh, that's a long time
It
ago.
is. It was a return season, wasn't it?
It's probably over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
35.
Yeah.
Patricia wrote a play called Lily and May about two homeless women, and we did it together. We'd sort of, I think maybe I'll talk for both of us. We saw each other. We both went to drama colleges. I went to Melbourne State College. Patricia went to Rusden. We were both doing drama there, and that was pre-VCA. So if you wanted to do any theatre, you really went to those drama colleges. We didn't really want to be drama teachers, did we?
No.
But we just wanted to sort of, create theatre. And then we were in a play together, my partner's play, called The Colony by Wayne Macaulay. And
I was her servant.
Thank you. Things haven't changed. Excellent. We established the rules and the status. And then, we had a great time working together and sort of were very interested in the same sort of style and the same sort of visceral nature of the theatre we wanted to create. So it was great that Patricia asked me to be in her play. And then we, did this play at La Mama. It was a two-hander and we just really didn't have any set, or we had like one lighting state. Very, very simple, but very physical. We created it from over many, many, many weeks in a scout hall, working vigorously, very physically.
Yeah.
And that show happened at La Mama, and then that just went on and had many, many, many seasons.
Yeah.
Travelled to Canada and America and Ireland and Edinburgh, London. Yeah, it's terrific. At the Arts Centre, it was very interesting because it was a raw two-hander, just Patricia and I with a pram, and then Malthouse. Actually, before Malthouse, it was called Playbox Theatre. The artistic director came along and saw our little show at La Mama, and he actually picked up that play and said, I want to do it for part of Playbox. And Malthouse was being renovated, so he put us in the Arts Centre in the studio, the George Fairfax studio, and he engaged Michael Lunig to design it. It was his first theatre design. And then he wanted us to extend it, so he got a dramaturg involved, didn't he? So Patricia wrote more, and there was a dramaturg. And the artistic director of the Playbox Theatre Company said he would like us to make it bigger. So he said, would you think about having a male in the work? And so we embraced this sort of male character who played music in it. And we made this bigger work, and of course we had more expensive costumes, not just our op shop costumes. We had the full set, and
they made our costumes and then dirtied them.
They replicated our op shop costumes. Because there was a costume designer and they had to utilise the costume designer. But they didn't actually break them down very well, so Patricia and I went out the back and rubbed them in the dirt and poured wine and coffee all over them.
What was it like? I mean, I saw the one, was at Universal, I think.
Yeah, you saw the good one.
Well, no, it was... we had quite a few people walk out of the Arts Centre studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's one point in the show I actually asked for money. And
from the audience,
not ask, demand.
Demands. Yeah, we had a few walkouts of that, but then so it was interesting that we had the most. We had a big rehearsal time, we had the whole thing. But then the show that went on tour was back to just Patricia and I and the pram with no lighting, no set, nothing, and that's the one that toured, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was practical.
And the collaboration then sort of developed from then. I was kind of an aspire. I really wanted to be a great actor, and you can really want that all your life, and know that you haven't quite got whatever it is. And one of the elements, I think, is that you can be too afraid. And I was always just too afraid. And it's nice when actors have a little bit of fear.
You
That's
were
gorgeous.
gutsy. You were great, Patricia.
Oh no, that's it.
She was marvellous.
Well, that's why we're collaborators. So
I love her dearly.
Oh, you were magnificent.
No, you were better than me. Come on, Alison.
Your comic timing.
Your physicality. Your language. Marvellous.
Maybe we should give up this.
Fabulous.
Tit for tat, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had like huge arguments, creative
Oh,
differences?
Would you like to say something, Nicole Wilks?
Nicci?
Yeah, we have a feisty relationship at times.
Entertaining. I call it entertaining relationship.
But
She says things like this to me in the middle of rehearsal. Get rid of that line, it's naff. Mostly I go on. You know, and sometimes
sometimes you fight. You go, what are you talking about?
Because it's not, and so doesn't realise the gems. No, we kind of we fight, but not really.
I think it's so great that we really have a really similar aesthetic. And Patricia can come in and, you know, when I've worked on other plays with writers, you know, sometimes I always welcome a writer in the room when I'm directing.
You've worked with many writers though.
Yeah. But there are some writers where you have to please leave the room and extricate go now. But Patricia, I mean, it's your instincts are, you know, fabulous, and it's wonderful to have Patricia in the room. And we are very similar. We've got such a similar sort of aesthetic, a similar sort of tone and temperament, and it's great. It is like working as one person sometimes.
One thing that was really striking about the production of Shit that's just closed at 45 Downstairs is because is it the second season, or have there been other seasons? The seventh. Okay, pardon
we've
me.
had little mini seasons.
Yeah.
They're not. You know.
But how much the physical, and same with Love, is how much the physical movement is absolutely integrated into the language. And I was curious about how that happened. Like, does Patricia write the text and then you work on the text with Patricia, or is there some other process that happens?
I think that as a playwright, I think what we share is a great love of actors. And and I sort of think I can't believe how many plays don't use actors well. And I can't bear it. It really irritates me. So you think that you've got these people and they're in a space and with your language, and you don't give them their due. And there's something fabulous about really writing for them and writing for them well. And I think that also that means is giving them space to do things. So you know that stuff where you go to a lot of naturalistic theatre and you think, my God, they haven't got any space to even move between the lounge room and the bed and the blah-de-blah and the thing. They're all kind of stitched up and stuck. And so it is sort of marvellous for to be able to give the space for a director to take actors. Sometimes one cheats. So we were talking about this bit of sex in Love, and I go, they fuck, full stop. That's Susie's problem, or that's a good reason.
I think that's the writer's job.
I can't bear any of that shit anyway. But you know, like it. But you kind of, in a way, it's a gift, isn't it, Susie?
Oh yes, I love creating those scenes, the kissing and the fucking. It's so exciting. No, but I think we both have a real love for bodies.
Yeah.
And you know, as Patricia said, using actors really well.
So did you write that part for Nicci? Did you know Nicci was going to play that role?
I mean, I'd tell her that I did.
Oh, thanks, Patricia. I know.
Because some actors sort of think you do. But I find that really hard to write for particular actors, so I've never ever done it. But
Yeah.
I kind of knew really quickly that she was a
Would make a
perfect
great
Billy.
Billy.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And,
So-
you know, because you don't think, oh, there's a plethora of them. You
Yeah.
know that there's just who's got the guts or
So Nicci, when you get that text, what happens? I mean, watching the three of you on the stage is such a well-oiled machine. I mean, you it's so precise. You're so at home in that role, all
Yes.
three of you.
It is a very good team.
Yeah,
Very good team. We are very lucky we get along so well, the cast,
Yeah.
but also the whole team. I think it was 10 women
Okay.
worked on shit. So it was great in the rehearsal room, the first rehearsal period, having 10 women in the room. Not saying it was great not having a man in the room. Anyway, with that text, well, for me, because I didn't grow up doing acting at all. Yeah. I attempted, didn't get in anywhere. So, and before, Patricia had asked me to do shit, and before that I was already doing another play with Susie, and kind of struggling a bit. It was in the early days, and I was like, I don't think I want to do shit, and Susie's like, oh, no, Patricia would like you to do shit. I was like, no, I don't think so. And I don't know if you remember this, Susie, but we went and did a reading in a park of shit, just Susie and I. Susie said, come on, well, let's just go and read it. Read a little bit and see how you feel, because we really like you to do it. So we sat in the park near Malthouse and read a bit of shit, and it was just easy for me.
Right.
So, and after that, I went, oh yeah, okay, I'll do it. But I think there's something about the poeticism of it, and the way it flows. It's yeah.
You're all very physical as well.
Yeah, I suppose I am quite.
Patricia didn't write. She did put in, though. There's quite a lot of choreography in the work in terms of
In the text.
In the text.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
But you didn't. It wasn't purely descriptive, but there was Patricia wanted the nature of the gang.
Okay.
Yeah, and she wanted. She
Is that a cheating bit, or was
a
that,
cheating bit?
or was she saying she cheated sometimes and just?
in leaving it up to us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
A little
A
bit.
little. It
Yeah.
gives you a little bit. Some of them
Yeah.
gave you a bit of information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And yeah. So
Like
it's a
it's
combination.
very kind of corny because I wanted them to capture a kind of West Side Story gang feel,
Okay,
you know,
really?
with the click.
That's where that.
So you
She
have
got
a
the clip. That's
moment.
about it.
Yeah. So
We watched
as
it.
corny as it is, I like all
We,
the
yeah, we
little
watched
corny.
West Side Story
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Patricia's is tough and visceral, but really there's a little bit
Yeah.
corny in there.
She even,
Cornelius.
I think that
Corny
was the,
Cornelius.
Yeah, corny
Yeah.
Cornelius.
Name like
I
that.
She
think
always
even
liked
the
to have a
third-
song.
Yeah, remember we tried to put a song in
She
shit?
wanted a love song in
Really?
shit.
I had to sing a love song. She
did.
heard me try to sing and she went,
No.
forget it.
Good call, Susie.
Thank you, Alison. Every play, just about.
I don't know,
But
try- keep trying,
there is
keep
something
trying.
about the rhythms and the way it flows, that text is, yes, I mean, it's beautiful to do. It is.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
And we all love it, and this is our 7th season, and none of us would say no to doing a season of shit.
Wow.
They might be too old soon.
No, no we're not, no we're not, no we're not.
Well, you can absolutely see that in the performances. I mean, you know, just how, I don't know, there's words for it, but how inhabited it is. They're not empty performances. They're just really, you can't stop watching all of you on stage, and you're always so present, and it's really exciting theatre.
I think
Yeah.
we also a part of the team is our designer Marg Horwell,
Yes.
who has worked on quite a lot of shows. We actually remember we were talking with Marg the other day, and I think the three of us, because you work with Marg separately and I've worked with Marg separately, we've done 14 shows together.
Right.
Yeah, and she's wonderful. She gives space for actors. She's architectural in one sense, and so she doesn't clutter a stage with props and set pieces. I love sparsity. I love if you can use a body well. You don't need, like in Love, you could have a bed, you could have a cell, you could have all these things, but you know, I love trying to strip things back. I'm looking at an assistant director that worked with me on a work called Broken last year, and we didn't have one prop or hardly any set. Is that right, Julian? That's correct. So Marg's beautiful. She creates beautiful spaces for directors, to play in.
And do you start working with Marg right at the beginning of right before you know, when you're first talking about the piece? So it's all, the whole team is this engaged collaboration,
For shit, I remember we all sat around. Another work we created with Marg Animal. But we sat around for shit. I remember we had a few readings, and then we sat around the kitchen table at my house, and we did a reading. We had soup and garlic bread and talked, and then it was early stages, and Marg was just listening to it, and she had a serviette on the table, and she drew the set on the...
Oh, wow.
You know. Yeah. And we talked about it. She said, what do you want them to do? And I said, I want them to be able to jump and run, and I think there's room for a lot of physicality. And she said, like this? And I go, like that.
So how do you work out the choreography of the movement? Like, because there's a lot of movement in both the shows. And he actually had a dancer in Love,
she was actually Carly Shepherd was really great in terms of helping with that choreography.
Yeah,
I knew I wanted to have physical sequences and incorporate sort of movement sequences. Carly was really great in helping with some of the choreography. In shit, it was very funny. We thought we should get a choreographer because I knew I wanted it to move and some little dance sequences, and I'd lined someone up for one morning, and all the actors were really going, oh my God, we've got a choreographer. And her name was Renee, and so I walked in the morning, they were going, is Renee coming? We're warming up, we're so excited. I've got a 4-hour session with our choreographer. And in the meantime, she actually contacted me and said, I can't do the workshop, sorry. And they were also looking forward to it. So I remember I said, I'm just going to go and get Renee. And so I went out. Being an actor, I came back in and went, hi, okay. And so we did this whole choreographic workshop as I was Renee, and I think the choreography stuck. It was pretty funny, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you walk back and click, 4 steps, and run, and move. It was sort of a joke, but that's
how it happened.
Really?
Channeling Renee.
amazing.
But I'm very open actors who are, willing to go with anything.
So, I'm on the second question. I wanted to talk a bit about what you think political theatre is. I think you've always done political theatre, but it's often really misunderstood as a term. It's people talking about politics or something, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's
Well, I think most people think of it as an agitprop and I don't mind a bit of agitprop.
No,
There are people quite poo-poo it and think it has no finesse, but I think sometimes the blatancy or the scream of what we want or the demand that we need to make about the world and the country we live in particular is absolutely fabulous in theatre sometimes, and just what I want to hear. And I definitely call myself a political playwright. And I once heard Stephen Sewell say, and I kind of want to have copied him ever since, say that he's a political person and he writes for the theatre. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel, that I carry a political perspective and a strong one. And I would say my feminism has led my class politics, but I'm interested in the lies that this country tells about itself, and so that's a political act. I think it's an old adage where you go, everything's political, but it is. And so there is something about when you go to mainstream and you see those plays and you see the plays that are told over and over again, or brought from good solid plays that are brought from New York or London, and you think, well, you think these aren't political. You think these aren't saying this is how the world goes, because they do.
They do.
And you sit there and you are affirmed about a whole lot of crap often, and nothing gets really contested. And so I love the term. People are really shy of it being called
yeah.
political or the work's political. Fuck, yes, it's political. It's about the world or about us, and we're shit. Often, we're shit. And not to kind of address that as an artist in this time, it feels just dreadful.
What about
It's
you,
a bit
Susie?
serious.
I mean, do you think it like Patricia or?
Yeah, I don't think I'm a really overtly political person. I think I've got,
But
a good, solid politic. Well, I have. I'm not.
Yeah.
But I remember for years when I was connected with Melbourne, Patricia, was one of the co-founders of Melbourne Workers Theatre, a very important company in Melbourne and in Australia, who did work with, were based at Jollymont Railway Yards and actually worked with in workplaces and collected stories from workers. It also moved into diverse stories that were never told from various different cultural stories. That was political theatre, and I got Patricia sort of invited me into that world. Before I was doing sort of political cabaret, yeah, I suppose I do. I like saying something about the world, and hopefully, always challenging myself, but also challenging an audience. But when I do see some plays that, when they smack you over the head with, an idea or some rhetoric or some, if it's not done, I'd like it to be more, I suppose, more teased out and more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it seems to me that plays that say they're political are not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just reinforcing some kind of binary or something that I find a really not interesting way of looking at where we are in the world.
And, so would you call shit a political piece of theatre?
Well, yeah, of course it is.
Because we know what it's about.
I mean, what about you, Nicci, as a performer?
Well, I suppose if I think about a few of the works I've made with Susie, like Animal, and even The Long Pigs, that when we made even The Long Pigs, which is a dark clown show, it's a bit hard to describe, but we looked at all the taboos in life, really. That's kind of where we tried to create the work from, and then taking a dark clown perspective on that. And same with Animal, that was about, really, in the back of our heads, domestic violence, really, towards women. So I suppose for me, I do try to create work. I suppose it's not pure entertainment. I want to create work that says something more, and something that is not often seen on stage.
Yeah.
It's funny. It is a funny term, political theatre. I think today, I think it has a different meaning, say, back in the day of Melbourne Workers Theatre or in the 70s, 80s. But it's different now. Or people don't use it now.
No.
Is that because of being worried about people, box office sales and funding and
I think
being safe?
Patricia's right in saying, people look at this stuff and think it's not political. Like there's a depoliticisation that's happened to our entire arts culture. But it's incredibly political in terms of what it's reaffirming and asserting to be normal, isn't it? That's I'm very personally really suspicious of anything that says it's not political because you're like, absolutely, that means it totally is. So, all right, well, at this point, it's time for questions, I think. So we have two people. Oh, yes, please.
I just about that political. I think what happens when it's like with any piece of work that you're making, that you have to kind of meet, you have to approach it with blatant seduction, so that you really, if political theatre usually meet, the sledgehammer approach or something.
Well, that's the idea of it, because I don't think that's what it is.
No, so it's about using all your craft and on all levels to kind of not to sneak in under and take somebody by surprise, really, because otherwise you do get that kind of turning away and don't tell me something or don't try to teach me anything. The didacticism drives people crazy. So it is really about trying to. It's quite a difficult craft, isn't it, to kind of do that seduction. So that, one, you're not going to walk out in the first 10 minutes and it's an empty theatre. And, as much as we can try to say that that's really great, it isn't. One or two might be fine, but not a whole audience. And I think the seduction is also about kind of that notion of entertaining or engaging, so that you got to engage deeply, because politics has become really, really complex, and it's not so simple to go good and bad anymore. It is the seduction is about being able to think about things afresh and anew, and care about something, care about what we already know, I suppose.
Yes. All right. I just I read a really interesting essay yesterday about care and maintenance, and it was one of the most hopeful things I've read recently. But anyway, that's aside. We have two people, I think, with microphones. So if people have any questions for Patricia or Susie or Nicci, please ask them. Okay.
Hello, my name's Will. This has been delightful. Thank you. I haven't seen Love, but I saw the season of Shit that was last at 45 downstairs, and I'm really interested in that tense feeling of being a room full of middle and upper class people watching a story that is, as we've said, so rare. And I'm wondering, Nicci, if you ever feel that particularly acutely in any particular performance, and how as artists you keep the audience on the hooks to not just be kind of watching something foreign in a kind of pervy way.
I don't often think about it, but the thing about Shit is that you are, it's a very intimate space because the performance space is so tight to the audience. So sometimes it's hard to not see, because I like to not see who's there. But sometimes you do feel, and you do feel who is in the audience, particularly the first few rows. And I can't say if they're middle class when I'm in it or where they're from, but sometimes I do use their mannerisms to help me. There's one scene in Shit where I have to pace in front of the audience, and if they don't move their legs, I get really... So I use it. I get really... And one of my tests is to try and make them move their fucking legs, because this is my space now, kind of thing, and you're in the theatre and you're going to do what I want you to do. So sometimes I use a bit of that. But I suppose I don't really sense of who is in the audience until after.
It's very interesting. Nicci got really affected, and the other actors too. There was nearly every night of the audience, even though everyone got, before the show started, everyone was told to turn off their mobile phones. But inevitably, people still, were on, in the middle of Nicci's monologue, looking at their texts. There was phone calls nearly every night. So we ended up with the last few shows, our stage manager had to come into the theatre just before we...
Still didn't.
But what was that? Are they accidents? Are they? Is that about an attitude with the audience?
At the end of Shit too, and the last scene, like all three of us come together, and it's everything's zoned down into three human beings in this horrible situation, and it's been 55 minutes now of a quite, traumatic experience maybe for a lot of people, and then people will pull out their phone and just check the time, and and it's hard not to see that. But that's not about class. That's just about being addicted to...
Rude.
Yes, rude.
I will say, the night I went to see Shit, there was somebody, I was sitting next to this young man who so clearly wasn't middle class. He was the second time he'd come to see the play, and he was really excited, and he said, so he obviously was a theatre goer, but he seemed like from the outer suburbs or something like that, how he was dressed and how he was talking, and how excited he was by that play. So yeah, you can't be completely certain about who's in the theatre and assume who the audiences are. I mean, theatre is largely a middle-aged, I should say, audience.
Yeah.
You've got a better chance at somewhere like 45 or an independent space, but one, because mainstream is so expensive, the tickets, and they're so prohibitive, and so at least you kind of know there's a possibility with those theatres that someone can afford to.
Yeah, but after the show, I mean, I would get people coming up and saying how much they loved it, who, well, obviously from a middle-class background. And, I mean, also, I think for my character, sometimes you get people who just would not approach you, who just stand back and look at you.
Frightened of you.
Maybe, yeah, probably, yeah. But I also, as performing that show, I think that is one of the great things about doing Shit to those kinds of audiences. But all the three actors talked just the other day about how we think our favourite season was Darwin and also Aubrey, because it wasn't a middle-class theatre-going audience at all. It was general public, and we loved how much the general public loved that show, because so many regional theatres around Australia are too scared to program Shit. And I mean, even like speaking with Norpa up north, they're just like, oh, we just don't know how it would go. We don't know who would come. But I mean, Lynn and Aubrey at Hot House took a big risk, and what did she say? I think there's 90,000 people in the region, and the council, she fought for weeks to get the Shit banner put over the main street of Aubrey. I grew up in Aubrey, so I was, and I think they only had 4 complaints, and I think it was their biggest selling season. So, I've just digressed then, anyway.
Next question.
In terms of the funding, which seems to be such a problem for doing anything... Oh, sorry. It's in terms of funding for things that happen, in terms of what we see on the stage, do you think that there's any way to make inroads into that?
Into the funding?
And then to funding decisions that are made and for what we see on our stages.
Sort of that just really so pisses me off still with the Brandis thing. And so I think that we were given such a clout, such a beating with the Brandis taking the money away from mostly, who do you think? The independent sector, and then giving it to the mainstream and to major companies, and that money hasn't actually entirely been returned. And it was a great theft from us. And you can't help but think that's bloody political. What the hell? You don't want your artists to be funded to reflect the society they live in. You don't want those stories to be told. And why not? And it felt very purposeful and very mean-minded. And funding is so tight. So just in the last week, we have a really close friend, Melissa Reeves, who's a marvellous playwright, and her play won a huge award and has such promise, but no funding. And you kind of... It is so hard. Why wouldn't playwrights run a mile? Why are there so few of us, really? Because you can't last the distance properly without funding and without being backed. And I think it's really, really miserable, really.
And there's a real lack of independent theatre companies that can produce new Australian plays.
Yeah.
They're sort of, they've gone. I think there's always advocacy, and people are still, trying to talk to state funding and Australia Council. They're having reviews, but yeah.
I mean, it is about the structure thing. I mean, there's been the major performing arts, inquiry thing that they've had, and that's yet to come out, isn't it? But
If Labor got in, they were going to reinstate the funding.
that's right. That's not going to happen now.
No.
So I mean, I think we all have to survive first, and that's always a question for independent artists in Australia. It's hard.
But we would like something like, we just finished a season of Shit and Love, and we only did that season because 45 Downstairs Theatre backed it. And we actually, with 45, applied to get funding to put Love on, and we didn't get it. We got knocked back twice. So, we're so lucky to have a company like 45 Downstairs to sort of support it and back it. Otherwise, we've been invited to Venice Biennale Theatre Festival, but we actually had no show. It was crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
But there's so many decisions like that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's less funding. It goes down in real terms because it's not indexed. So, and then the cuts that have happened since the Abbott was elected means that it's just so much little, but the actual arts sector is so much larger.
I know.
So there's just less and less and less money, and it's really, people have to get really innovative about how they find money, where they find money, and what really happens is that artists end up subsidising the arts. They've always been the largest subsidisers of the arts.
Like with Love, we really had, all up, it was like 2.5 weeks rehearsal.
Wow,
Which
really?
is, for a 70-minute
Really?
play. Yeah.
You couldn't tell.
Well, it's supposed to be 3 weeks, but,
Yeah.
a few people got ill and someone had to go away.
Yeah.
So all up, we added up, was like 2 weeks and 2.5 days actual rehearsal. Wow. You have to work really hard and furiously,
Yeah.
where,
It's not fair on the work, though, is it?
No,
And
it's
not fair
and
on
actually,
the artist.
Love,
It's like-
it grew and grew over the season, and our last few shows were so beautiful. But you have to whack it in front of in an audience, and you haven't got the luxury of main stage companies when they do previews. You have one if you're lucky. Where even Red Stitch, what a luxury! They have 6 previews. It's tough.
I think we've got time for one more question.
I just wanted to ask Patricia about your writing process. I mean, the plays are so distinctive in terms of rhythm and musicality of language. Do you stomp about the house at the early stages of writing, getting that rhythm? Does that come later? Do you put it in very consciously?
I do. I mean, I don't write all plays. I kind of feel like I've got the grungy poeticism in a certain number of plays. I am a bit addicted to it, though. I kind of... if anybody saw me in those early days, I would look really nutty because I read it out, and I think I'm really so fucking funny sometimes. So I kind of laugh.
She rings me sometimes and reads passages, and you go, she's laughing.
I kind of like it if it trips along, if there's a vitality in it or a cheek, but I do like the clumsy dumb rhyme. I like the way it hits so obviously and bluntly. It's probably a bit childlike, but I kind of think, as long as the rhythm is working. It's also a way of cheating a vernacular that can be hard on the ear. I like the listener, you fucking tongue, you fucking. And in the real world, it's powerful, but it's tough on the ear. And so kind of the poeticism cheats being able to say a lot of things, using a language that is not usually acceptable.
There's a thing flashing at us saying it's time to
there
stop.
is, certainly.
It's flashing red, guys. It's like... So I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up. Thanks so much for coming, and please thank Nicci, Patricia and Susie.
And thank Alison.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.